few months ago, we showed you a PVC scuba rack that I'd built for Lyell. A lot of you requested a step-by-step guide on how you could go about building the same. Today, we're going to show you and tell you how you could go about building this step-by-step. Welcome to Everything Scuba. Welcome to Everything Scuba. I'm Josh. Today, we're outside, and you may hear the sounds of nature. We're going to show you how to build your own scuba rack. So this video is going to be longer than our typical 10-minute videos. We'd love to make it as short as possible, and we'll try to, but each step is critical, so stick with us. First, we're going to show you all the parts that we've gathered for the scuba rack, the way we build it. In the description below, there will be a cut length and a list of parts. So back a couple of years ago, when I built that rack for Lyell, it cost me about $50 in materials, plus my time and labor. Now, a few years later, and in the middle of a global pandemic where material shortages are an issue, all the material gathered for this rack today costs between $120 and $150. And also, I gathered these parts not from our local plumbing supply, but I just went to our local big box store. And you could find this stuff at just about any hardware store. Looking at materials that we're going to use, we have several 10-foot lengths of 1 1/4 inch Schedule 40 PVC, one 10-foot length of 1 inch Schedule 40 PVC, and then we have a length of 3/4 inch Schedule 40 PVC. We also have a 6-foot piece of dowel rod, and that'll come in handy later. These are 1 1/4 inch PVC crosses. You can see it makes a cross. It allows us to put pipe in each side. The next part is an 1 1/4 PVC T. And again, similar to the cross, except it only has 3 locations that we can place pipe. 1 1/4 PVC elbows. These are 90-degree elbows. We're going to use 6 3/4 inch PVC 90-degree elbows, just like the 1 1/4, but smaller. We'll use these for the little accessory hooks. Is a 1 1/4 by 3/4 PVC bushing. And what this will allow is for us to reduce down the size when we make our accessory hooks. Also for our accessory hook, 3/4 inch PVC caps are 1 1/4 by 1 inch bushings. These are going to go into our top pieces. Since we are not going to use 1 1/4 for that top rail, we're going to use 1 inch. This is a way for us to reduce that size down. The last major piece that we need some PVC cement. So typically with PVC, you would use a primer and then a glue or a cement. Since this is not going to hold any pressure, we're not running water, air, any other fluid through this, we're just going to use cement. All we're asking of the cement is to hold it together. So a couple of changes from the initial rack that we showed you. One, that rack was 7 feet long and 7 feet tall. We had a lot of requests to make the rack a little smaller, fit through a door easier. So we're going to make it 6 feet tall and 6 feet long. For our metric friends, if you're not sure, 6 feet, that's 72 inches, and 1 inch is 2.54 centimeters. I'll let you do the conversion. Another change that we're going to make that we mentioned in the first video, some scuba hangers are made with this little bit of a neck, and they're difficult to get on the 1 1/4 pipe. So we're going to replace the top rod with 1 inch PVC, and that'll make those hangers that are tight much easier to use. Okay, we're going to show you a few different ways that you could cut the PVC pipe for the rack. The first one, something that everybody probably has or has access to. This is specifically a PVC handsaw, but any handsaw will cut Schedule 40 PVC. Another option, typically used for smaller pipe, this is a hand ratcheting cutter. This one happens to be a little larger than some. It will go large enough for the 1 1/4. You know, more expensive than a handsaw. If you're going to use a lot of PVC, you're probably going to have one of these already. The third one, if you're doing a lot, this is essentially a cordless electric version of this ratchet cutter. Much simpler, really nice for tight spaces if you're actually using this for plumbing. Probably not what you guys are going to go and buy to make this rack, but we'll show you all the options and you can make your own decision what you want to use. So we've reviewed all the pieces and parts. Now we're going to start step 1 of the assembly. So this is going to be step 1. These will be the lower pieces that lay on the ground for each of our 3 risers. This one we've already glued together in the positions it's going to go. This one, the pieces are cut and everything, but it's not glued together and put together. And this one, these are essentially our pieces. We determined that we need a 15 3/4 inch long piece between our elbow and our cross, and also our elbow and our T's. We want these, the elbow in the center, the T's, they're all going to face one another. There will be a piece of pipe to spread them, but otherwise all three will have the uprights all in the same place. And if you notice, these PVC fittings, they have a socket in them. Roughly the depth of that socket should be 1 pipe diameter. In this instance, we're using 1 1/4 pipe. That socket depth is 1 1/4. But if I have this laid out, outside, I want to be 24 inches or 2 feet. I can then measure from this edge to this edge, and that gets me very near the length that I want. So in this case, I'm going to make that cut 15 3/4 inches long. Now we're going to have a second small piece that's going to be connecting this elbow and the T on this side. And that we're going to go with 2 3/8 inches. So here, because I have it, I'm going to use the easy way. I've measured out my 15 3/4 inches. I can take this cutter, I slip it over, I line this up with my mark, pull the trigger, it cuts it. Now for this next one, we need a 2 3/8 inch piece. I'll use the hand ratcheting cutter. Same thing, I line that blade up, center it up on my mark. It's a little more laborious. And I cut it. We're going to use this regular PVC cement. We are not priming it. So Lyell just asked me if we needed a separate brush to use the glue. And I've never noticed, but these Odie cans say brush in can. And they have this little dauber. And depending on the size of the can, the dauber is bigger or larger. This is a pretty small one. We're going to put some glue inside the sock of the fitting. We're also going to put some glue on the outside of the pipe, roughly the depth. I like to do the end as well. Now with PVC glue, one thing, it's good to put it together and turn it and then hold it. In the previous rack we made, I put this lower brace in the center between the uprights. Lyell likes to use a large tote to sit down below just in case there's any dripping when the rack is inside. He asked if we could move that lower support that really just holds it all together towards the rear so it was less of an issue for his tote. So that's why we've moved the T from in the center to the back. Okay, so one tricky thing with gluing this together, we need this piece to set in a certain way. These uprights, we want to both be square to one another, which the elbows should make them square. But if we turn one elbow and turn the other elbow and they're not square to one another, then our rack is going to be wonky. We also need this lower piece to be at a 90-degree or a right angle in relation to these uprights. There are a few different ways we could do this, but the way that I find simplest, although fiddly, is we can use one level on the socket of each, and if each one is level, then we know that they are at right angles, because our levels are at right angles. We have our 3 lower pieces laid out on the ground. We have measured for our spreader bar pieces, and they are 33 1/8 inch long. So now we will glue them in. So there'll be one there, there'll be one here, and that will form the basis of our rack. The lower portion of the 2 end risers, we have 3 T's. We have one piece that will be a cross brace. It is 20 inches long that we measured from the inside to inside here. So they're the same. We also have a 2.5 inch piece that's going to go between 2 T's. And then we have some, I believe, 33 inch long pieces that will be up to the first T. So now you can see we have the lower half of each of the 2 ends assembled and glued together. We had our 32 3/4 inch tall risers, a 20-inch spreader, and a little 2.5 inch bald piece here that we will end up gluing another T onto as a cross support. As you can see, this PVC, even once we get the top together, it would be pretty flexible. We're going to put a cross brace in the back that should help hold it together. So in the large rack that we initially built for Lyell, we had some long diagonal pieces up closer to the front. We feel like it may not be needed since this rack is shorter as well as shorter in overall length. We're hoping that just the rear support will be enough. That should make it simpler and easier to build. It'll give a little better access for equipment. Okay, now we've put in our center support. It's essentially the same as our two ends. The difference is going to be, instead of a T on the center support like the two ends, it's going to get a cross. So now we're going to build this on the ground because we can use the ground to keep all the pieces in line and square to one another. So on each end we have a T, then we have a 33 1/8 inch long piece which matches these lower cross braces. So now we'll glue it together. So now you'll see we have the cross with the two T's on our two 33 1/8 inch long pieces. And you'll notice the cross and the T's are all flat on the ground. That's going to help keep them square to one another. So when we set them on our three risers, they're all going to be in line. Okay, as you can see, we have the lower portion mostly together. Now that we have this back brace, you notice the whole thing will want to work against itself and not just bend and flex. We think that's going to work out well. Our next step is going to be to build this center section. On the last rack we used 3 crosses and some reducers to make some little hooks, and that's what we're going to do for this. We're going to put together this center accessory hook bar, and you'll notice there are a lot of pieces. This is kind of a fiddly little bit. It's going to be a lot of stuff, but to kind of show you what we have here, we have 1.25 inch PVC on either end. We have 3 crosses. Coming out of the crosses, we have some bushings. They're 1.25 inch by 3/4. We have some short pieces of 3/4 PVC, a 3/4 90, an elbow, and a 3/4 cap that's going to go on another piece. And you'll notice each of these 3 are the same. Now we'll move some of this and we're going to assemble one of these, and it'll be mirrored with the others. And all of the cut lengths and a list of all the parts will be able to be found in the description. So we have our cross. We have these bushings. These bushings, when we glue them, they're going to push in. And when we get glue on there, they're going to shove much farther in. But to show you how it will be, then our 3/4 PVC will go into the bushing. Our elbow will face up. We have another piece of 3/4 PVC. And then we'll just throw a cap on it to make it pretty. And this is what's going to make our accessory hooks. And we're going to have the same thing on this side with a bushing, a piece of PVC, an elbow, another piece of PVC, and a cap. So as you can see, this is how these become an accessory hook. And you could adjust the length of this PVC to make as big or as small a hook as you wanted, as well as changing the size. We use 3/4 because it's pretty strong. We assembled, and now we have installed this center accessory hook section. As you can see, when it's all put together, it doesn't look that bad. When you saw it with all the parts, it can be a little bit of a pain. So it's in. We made sure that this was level, as well as when we glued this in, that these were all level. So the next step will be to add all of our risers up to an equal height that our top will then connect to. Okay, so now we installed our vertical risers above the lower half. You know, because we have this back brace in and this additional T, this back length is 28.5 inches, whereas this front one is 32 3/4. And so the 3 rear ones are the shorter length, they're all the same, and the front 3 are all the same. Ideally, the top should be level all the way across, so when we set that top piece on, they all connect. Okay, so now we're going to assemble the top. And so for a top, each end we have a 90-degree elbow, a 9-inch length of 1.25" PVC. We have a T. Now, because we're going to use 1 inch instead of 1.25" for our top, where our hangers can get on there easier, we're going to use an 1.25" by 1 inch bushing. Another 9-inch piece of PVC, so the T is centered, and then another elbow on the other side. The two ends are just mirror images of one another. The center is a little bit different. We have the same elbows, same 9-inch piece of PVC on each side, but we have a cross instead. And again, we're using 1 inch for our hangers to be easier to hang, so we'll have bushings here. Then we will need to, once we have these assembled, cut our 1-inch PVC lengths for here, and then before we glue this all the way together, we're going to slide a piece of 3/4 inch dowel rod through there, and that should really strengthen that PVC that we're going to hang on. Okay, so now we've glued one end on and our centerpiece, and we could go ahead and we've cut our piece. The bushings took up about 3/8 of an inch, so we already knew our distance with this one, so we're able to go ahead and cut this piece minus that 3/8, so it's a 32 3/4 inch piece. So I have that. I'm going to glue that one in. Now before I glue in this next piece or this end, I'm going to go ahead and try to insert our dowel, and it'll be through, this piece will be glued in. And the whole idea with this dowel is that it's helping to solidify. You know, this PVC is pretty strong, but still flexible. If this sits out in the sun, it warms up and it's just going to be even more flexible. Now, we don't want to use wood outside because it would rot, but since it's going to be sealed inside of this PVC, I don't foresee this wood ever rotting, and it will help take up the space inside this PVC and make it very rigid, and it should work really well to hang stuff on. So you may notice we've tipped the rack on its side so we could use the ground to support, as we had to gently persuade this dowel into that piece of PVC. It fits very tight, and the little bit of glue that's in there made it fit even tighter. So you may have to do the same. So the third method of cutting PVC that we're using today is the handsaw. And again, this is a specific PVC handsaw, but you could use any handsaw. PVC is pretty soft. So we have our mark. I use my thumb to line it up back and forth to get a little groove. And then the big thing is just try to cut it. So, but you notice it's a lot dirtier of a cut, leaves a mess. So now we're going to take our final piece, this end, and we're going to insert it, and this should finish out the rack. As you can see, here's our completed rack. If you remember, Lyell's was 7x7. This one is 6x6. It is significantly smaller. I think it's going to be rigid enough without the cross brace, since it's a shorter distance. It's still, I think, plenty rigid. I'm 220 pounds and I can hang on this. So now we'll show you why we moved that cross brace back, and we'll throw some gear on it so you can see what it would look like. So by moving that lower brace back, drip bins fit a lot better now. These hangers go on much easier on the 1 inch than they did on the 1.25 inch. They'll slide. That'll be a lot nicer. So hooks, you know, you could throw your fins on, gloves, hoods, really whatever you want to. You know, if you followed along, this took most of an afternoon, fair amount of work to put this together and try to tell you how we're doing it. If you liked it, if it was helpful at all, hit that like button, subscribe, tell your mama, tell your friends. So as you may notice, my X-Deep side mount harness is hanging on the rack. It's been quite a while since I've given you any content on the side mount series. We already talked about rigging tanks and setting up your rig sets. We have yet to talk about the different bungee styles and how to set them up, how to adjust your harness, and we'll specifically walk you through setting up a new X-Deep Tech 2.0, click the link down below.